Picture this. Germany, 1934. A 52-year-old man, decorated general, former chancellor, one of the most dangerous political operators in modern European history, is standing in his hallway, phone pressed to his ear, having a perfectly ordinary morning conversation. Then someone knocks at the door. He walks over, opens it, speaks 4 words, and 2 gunshots shatter the silence. One of the most powerful minds in Weimar Germany is dead on his own floor. No arrest, no trial, no warning, just blood, a government cover-up, and a story buried for decades. And what makes it even more gut-wrenching? His wife heard those shots and came running. They killed her too. This is WW2 Time Tales. And if you love real, raw history from the most brutal era the world has ever seen, you're in the right place. If you're new here, subscribe right now and ring that bell. We drop deep dive history every single week, and these are the stories they never put in your textbooks. Now let's go back to Germany, 1882, and trace exactly how one man's obsession with power became his death sentence. Kurt Ferdinand Friedrich Hermann von Schleicher was born on April 7, 1882, in Brandenburg an der Havel, a river city about 35 miles west of Berlin, deep inside the heart of the German Empire. His father was a Prussian military officer, and from the beginning, young Kurt was being shaped for a life in uniform. By age 14, he was already enrolled in a military cadet school, shaking hands with future German power brokers. His classmates included Oskar von Hindenburg, the president's son, and the brilliant future Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, who would later mastermind some of the most devastating military operations of World War II. Here's what makes Schleicher fascinating from the very start. He was surrounded by warriors, but he was never truly one of them. He earned his commission as a lieutenant in 1900, was promoted to Oberleutnant in 1909, and by 1913 had joined the German General Staff at the rank of Hauptmann, the equivalent of a U.S. Army captain. That same year, he attended the prestigious Kriegsakademie in Berlin, Germany's most elite military academy, where he met a man named Franz von Papen. The two would become political allies, bitter rivals, and ultimately, instruments of each other's destruction. When World War I erupted in July 1914, Schleicher served at the Supreme Army Command Headquarters, far from the catastrophic meat grinder of the Western Front. He briefly served as Chief of Staff of the 237th Division on the Eastern Front, the only time he was anywhere near actual combat. By the time the guns went silent in November 1918, Schleicher had risen to major and attached himself firmly to General Wilhelm Groener, one of Germany's most influential military figures. His battlefield was never the trench. It was the conference room, the telephone, the private dinner. And he was absolutely lethal in those spaces. Here is where the story gets genuinely jaw-dropping. When the German Empire collapsed in 1918 and the democratic Weimar Republic stumbled into existence, Schleicher didn't mourn the old order. He adapted. He helped engineer arrangements that allowed the German army to function as a semi-autonomous state within a state. While politicians debated in the Reichstag, Schleicher was quietly ensuring that the military answered to itself first and to the government second. In 1919, he helped establish the Freikorps, paramilitary units made up of hardened war veterans used to violently suppress communist and leftist uprisings across Germany. These men were brutal. They didn't take prisoners. They set the template for the political violence that would define the next 2 decades. But the most explosive secret operation was this. In the early 1920s, Schleicher joined a clandestine group called Sondergruppe R, a top-secret program that cooperated directly with the Soviet Union to secretly rebuild Germany's military power. The Treaty of Versailles had legally shackled Germany to a maximum of 100,000 soldiers, with no tanks, no air force, and no heavy weapons. Schleicher's operation made all of that irrelevant. German officers trained on Soviet soil. Soviet engineers shared technology. German factories, relocated east of the border, built the weapons that Versailles had forbidden. It was one of the most audacious violations of an international treaty in modern history, and it ran for years without public exposure. He also helped organize the Schwarzer Reichswehr, illegal shadow military units, operating outside any legal framework, known for assassinating political opponents deemed traitors. These weren't rogue actors. This was organized state violence quietly authorized from deep within the military establishment. Schleicher didn't just know about it, he helped build it. Meanwhile, he climbed. Oberstleutnant. Meanwhile, he climbed. Oberstleutnant in 1924. Oberstleutnant to 1924. Oberst in 1926. Generalleutnant. Major General in 1929. In October 1927, he married Elisabeth von Hennigs from one of Germany's oldest aristocratic families. They had no children together, though Elisabeth brought a daughter from a previous marriage into their home. By all social appearances, Schleicher was a pillar of the old Prussian establishment. Behind closed doors, he was one of the most dangerous political operators in Europe. In 1929, Defense Minister Wilhelm Groner created an entirely new government post specifically for Schleicher, the Ministeramt, designed to manage relations between the military, the navy, and the civilian government. Schleicher immediately turned it into something far more powerful. He built an intelligence network of journalists, bureaucrats, and friendly politicians. He gathered damaging information on rivals. He planted stories in newspapers. He was running a soft power operation decades before that term existed. By 1930, Schleicher had grown so influential that he could topple the German government from a single phone call to President Paul von Hindenburg. He helped engineer the removal of Chancellor Hermann Müller, a democratic socialist, and installed Heinrich Brüning, a man willing to govern by presidential emergency decree rather than parliamentary majority. This was Schleicher's philosophy. Germany needed strong, decisive leadership. Democracy, in his view, was weakness. Then came the gamble that would define his legacy. Schleicher began secret negotiations with the Nazi Party. He believed he could absorb the SA, the Nazis' massive and violent paramilitary wing, into the regular German army, neutralizing their independent power while harnessing their fanatical energy. He built a personal relationship with Ernst Röhm, the scarred, battle-hardened commander of the SA, who shared Schleicher's dream of a fully militarized German state. In 1931, Schleicher changed army regulations to allow Nazi Party members to work in military supply depots, feeding organizational power directly to the movement. He genuinely believed he could control them. After the July 1932 elections made the Nazi Party the single largest in the Reichstag, Hitler demanded the chancellorship. Schleicher, remarkably, supported the idea in principle, but President Hindenburg refused, calling Hitler a bohemian corporal unfit for high office. Meanwhile, Schleicher turned on his own ally, Franz von Papen, who was serving as chancellor. Using a falsified military report claiming the army could not maintain order in a civil emergency, Schleicher forced von Papen's resignation. It was a ruthless, bloodless coup, the kind Schleicher had perfected. On December 3, 1932, Kurt von Schleicher became Chancellor of Germany. He had reached the summit, but what he found there was terrifying. His boldest move as Chancellor was trying to fracture the Nazi Party from within. He secretly offered a senior government position to Gregor Strasser, one of Hitler's most powerful lieutenants, with genuine mass support across northern Germany. If Strasser accepted, it could split the movement in half. For 48 tense hours, it looked like it might work. Then Hitler moved fast, stripping Strasser of every title and role within days. Strasser fled to Italy. The party closed ranks behind Hitler. Just like that, Schleicher's masterstroke was dead. He pressed on with an ambitious economic recovery plan, 2 million new jobs by summer 1933, built on public works, infrastructure, and agricultural investment. What stings most? The Nazis later adopted these exact policies, took full credit for the recovery, and buried his name completely. But no vision could save a government with no foundation. His cabinet was unpopular from day one. Then he made one careless blunder, mocking Oskar von Hindenburg, the president's son, sarcastically calling him the political mastermind of the Reich. Oskar never forgave him, and without the Hindenburg family's trust, Schleicher had nothing left. By late January 1933, he was finished. He went to President Hindenburg requesting emergency powers to dissolve the Reichstag and buy time for his economic reforms. Hindenburg refused, and while Schleicher sat waiting for a meeting that would never come, Franz von Papen, the man Schleicher had destroyed, was sitting in a private room with Hitler and Hindenburg, constructing a coalition government. They told the aging president that Hitler could be controlled inside a conservative cabinet. Hindenburg believed them. On January 28, 1933, Schleicher resigned the chancellorship. 2 days later, Adolf Hitler was sworn in as chancellorship. 2 days later, Adolf Hitler was sworn in as Chancellor of Germany. Schleicher's life's work, every calculated move, every manipulated alliance, every pulled string, had handed the keys of Germany to the one man he could never outmaneuver. After Hitler's rise, Schleicher retreated to his villa in Neubabalsburg just outside Potsdam, a beautiful lakeside suburb favored by Berlin's wealthy elite. He still had friends in the army. He still had political instincts. And by spring 1934, he was quietly exploring a return. Some of his supporters were privately discussing a new arrangement. Schleicher as vice-chancellor, Röhm as defense minister. A government that could challenge Hitler's tightening grip. These conversations were picked up by the SS. Heinrich Himmler's intelligence network was everywhere. Hitler decided to act before any opposition could organize. The morning of June 30th, 1934, the opening day of the Night of the Long Knives. Hitler's nationwide blood purge. A team of SS men dressed in plain civilian clothes arrived in a black car outside Schleicher's villa at approximately 10:30 in the morning. No uniforms, no insignia, just men in long coats with purpose and weapons. Inside the villa, Schleicher was on the telephone. The conversation was ordinary, a morning call, nothing urgent. Then came a knock at the front door. He set down the phone and walked to the hallway. He opened the door. His final words, heard clearly by his friend still on the other end of the line, were, "Jawohl, ich bin General von Schleicher." Yes, I am General von Schleicher. 2 shots. He was dead before he reached the floor. When Elizabeth heard the gunfire and ran into the hallway to reach her husband, the SS men shot her as well. She was carried into an ambulance, still alive. She died before it reached the hospital. The woman had committed no crime, held no political office, posed no threat to anyone, and she was murdered in her own home in front of her family's walls. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, recorded the day's events in his diary with the clinical detachment of a man filing a routine report. He noted the Berlin operations had gone smoothly, with one small problem: Elizabeth von Schleicher had unexpectedly died as well. He called it a hitch, the murder of an innocent woman. At the funeral, SS guards stood at the graveside and physically tore memorial wreaths from the ground. Mourners were photographed and identified. Schleicher's closest military friend, General Oberst von Hammerstein-Accord, the man who had resigned from the army in protest after Hitler's rise, was denied entry to his friend's burial. 13 days later, Hitler stood before the Reichstag and publicly accused Schleicher of conspiring with Ernst Röhm and the French ambassador André-François Ponty to overthrow the German government. The accusation was pure invention. François Ponty remained in Berlin, visible, active, and contradicting Hitler's story with his mere presence. But truth was irrelevant. The accusation needed only to sound plausible, and because Schleicher had spent a career in shadows, enough Germans were willing to believe the worst. In 1935, under quiet but persistent pressure from senior German army officers who knew the truth, Hitler privately admitted that Schleicher had been shot by mistake. His name was restored to his regiment's honor roll. Not a single German newspaper published a word of it. The army quietly closed the matter. The Nazi propaganda machine, however, continued spreading the treason narrative for years, ensuring that Schleicher's name remained tainted in public memory long after his murderers were calling themselves statesmen. Kurt von Schleicher was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly convinced he was the smartest political mind in Germany. He was probably right about everyone except one man. He thought he could use Hitler, contain him, control the game he had spent a lifetime mastering. He was wrong. And that single miscalculation cost him his career, his wife, his life, and his name. History remembers the executioners. It forgets the men they silenced. Not here. If this story hit you, do 3 things right now. Hit the like button, drop a comment telling me which moment shocked you most, and subscribe to WW2 Time Tales for deep dive history every week. Ring that bell. Share this with someone who loves real history. I'll see you in the next one.